Right now, as you're watching this video, somewhere in America, a school is closing its doors for the last time. A hospital is shutting down, a grocery store is boarding up its windows, and an entire community is slowly disappearing. The 2026 census data just dropped, and what it revealed about certain American towns is nothing short of heartbreaking. We're not talking about neighborhoods getting a little rough. We're talking about towns that are literally dying, losing half their population, watching businesses vanish, seeing their young people leave and never come back. These are places where your grandparents may have worked, where entire generations built their American dream. And today, they are shadows of what they once were. I've gone through the census numbers, the migration reports, the economic data, and I've found the 10 American towns that are fading the fastest. Some of these will shock you. Some might even hit close to home. Stay with me to the end because the last few on this list are ones nobody is talking about. And if you find this kind of content valuable, real data, real stories, hit that subscribe button right now. We cover stories like this every single week. Let's get into it. Number 1, Gary, Indiana. If you want to understand what it looks like when an American city loses its reason to exist, you go to Gary, Indiana. At its peak in the 1960s, Gary was a powerhouse. U.S. Steel had built an entire city around its operations here. The population was nearly 180,000 people. There were packed schools, busy downtowns, working-class families living the American dream on honest wages from the mills. Then the steel industry collapsed, and Gary never recovered. Today, according to the latest census data and population projections for 2026, Gary's population has dropped to approximately 67,000 people, a staggering loss of over 60% from its peak. That means for every 10 people who once called Gary home, only 4 remain. Walk through Gary today and you will see block after block of abandoned homes, entire neighborhoods where nature has started reclaiming buildings that haven't been touched in 20 years, vacant lots where houses used to stand, a downtown that echoes with the silence of what once was. The unemployment rate remains significantly higher than the national average. Nearly 30% of residents live below the poverty line. The city has struggled for decades to attract new investment, new businesses, or new residents. What makes Gary's story especially painful is that this didn't have to happen this way. When U.S. Steel began downsizing in the 1970s and 1980s, the city had no backup plan, no economic diversification, no alternative industries waiting in the wings. The town was built for one purpose, and when that purpose disappeared, so did the people. Gary is a warning. A warning about what happens when a community becomes completely dependent on a single industry, and in 2026, that warning is still being ignored by towns across America. Number 2, Youngstown, Ohio. Most people have never heard of Black Monday, but if you lived in Youngstown, Ohio, you know exactly what it means. September 19th, 1977. That was the day Youngstown Sheet and Tube closed its Campbell Works facility. In a single moment, over 5,000 people lost their jobs. And it didn't stop there. Within 5 years of that one decision, an estimated 50,000 jobs vanished from the Youngstown area. The city's population peaked in 1930 at 170,000 people. Today, it sits below 65,000, a population that has been bleeding out decade after decade. According to the most recent census estimates, Youngstown's metro area lost another 913 people between July 2024 and July 2025 alone. The poverty rate in Youngstown is nearly double that of the state of Ohio. Nearly 40% of residents live below the poverty line. Entire neighborhoods have long-term vacancy rates, abandoned properties with no prospect of ever being occupied again. But here's what makes Youngstown's story different from Gary. Some people are genuinely trying to fight back. Urban planners here pioneered what they call shrinking smart. Rather than desperately trying to repopulate, they've actually demolished thousands of abandoned buildings and converted the land into green space and urban farms. It's not a comeback, but it's a city learning to survive with less. The question is whether surviving with less is the best Americans can offer to a community that gave so much to this country's industrial greatness. Youngstown deserved better than Black Monday, and 50 years later, it's still paying the price. Number 3, Flint, Michigan. The world learned about Flint, Michigan through one of the most shocking public health disasters in modern American history. The water crisis that began in 2014 and exposed thousands of children to dangerous levels of lead contamination. But the water crisis didn't create Flint's decline. It just made the entire country watch it happen in real time. Flint was once a GM powerhouse. In the 1960s, the city had a population of nearly 200,000 people. General Motors employed tens of thousands of workers at good wages. It was exactly the kind of stable, blue-collar community that built the American middle class. Then GM began automating, then outsourcing, then closing plants altogether. By 2026, Flint's population has fallen to approximately 81,000 people, less than half of what it was at its peak. The poverty rate hovers around 40%, and despite years of promises from state and federal officials, the scars of the water crisis remain deep in the community's psyche. Parents who watch their children suffer health effects from lead exposure don't easily forget. Trust in government institutions hit rock bottom, and that distrust has made it even harder for Flint to attract the investment and new residents it desperately needs. The infrastructure is crumbling, schools have closed, businesses have left, and every year, more people make the decision to simply leave and start over somewhere else. Flint isn't just a story about bad water, it's a story about what happens when America abandons its working-class communities and then abandons them again when the cameras leave. Number 4. McDowell County, West Virginia. If you drove through McDowell County, West Virginia today, you would think you were driving through a different country. This is one of the most persistently declining regions in all of America. According to the USDA's Economic Research Service, most rural counties in central Appalachia, including most of West Virginia, continue to lose population year after year, even as other rural areas see modest recovery. McDowell County once had a population of over 100,000 people during the coal mining boom. Today, estimates put the population below 17,000, one of the steepest drops of any county in the entire United States. The coal industry that sustained this community for generations is gone. And unlike steel towns that at least had large cities nearby, McDowell County is deeply rural, geographically isolated, and has almost no infrastructure to support a transition to any new economy. Life expectancy here is among the lowest in the nation. Opioid addiction has devastated communities. Schools are underfunded. Hospitals have closed. According to Census data, natural decrease, meaning more deaths than births, is a defining feature of life here. This region isn't just losing people to outmigration, it's losing people because residents are dying faster than new ones are being born. McDowell County represents what researchers call persistent poverty, a cycle of economic hardship that spans generations and proves nearly impossible to break without massive outside intervention. America built its industrial age on coal from places like McDowell County. These communities deserve more than to be left behind when the fuel runs out. Number 5. Cahokia Heights, Illinois. Just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis sits a cluster of struggling Illinois communities, and Cahokia Heights sits at the center of one of the most dramatic stories of urban decline in the entire Midwest. Formed by the merger of several struggling cities including Cahokia, Allorton, and Washington Park, Cahokia Heights was created in 2021 in a desperate attempt to consolidate resources and stabilize a region in freefall. But the challenges were already deeply embedded. The area has seen consistent population decline, with census data showing ongoing losses driven by poverty, lack of jobs, and aging residents. Poverty rates exceed 40% in some neighborhoods. Property values have collapsed. Infrastructure is crumbling under the weight of a shrinking tax base that simply cannot fund basic services. This part of Illinois, sometimes called the Metro East, represents the classic pattern of decline. Manufacturing left, population followed, and what remains is a community struggling to provide even basic services to the residents who stayed. Many of those who stayed have done so not by choice, but because they lacked the resources to leave. That's one of the cruelest aspects of urban decline that census data often fails to capture. The people left behind aren't always those who love their hometown most. They're often those with the fewest options. Cahokia Heights is fighting. But fighting against decades of structural disadvantage is an uphill battle that requires more than local willpower. It requires national attention. Hey, before we continue, quick question. Are you subscribed to this channel? We dig into the stories that the mainstream media glosses over. Real data, real communities, real consequences. If that's the kind of content you want more of, hit subscribe right now and ring that bell so you never miss a video. We've got 5 more towns to get through, and trust me, some of the ones coming up are going to genuinely surprise you. Let's keep going. Number 6. Rockford, Illinois. Rockford, Illinois is an interesting case, and an important one, because on the surface, some recent data makes it look like a turnaround story. Zillow even named it one of the hottest housing markets of 2025 due to low prices attracting buyers. But cheap housing doesn't fix everything. And in Rockford's case, it reflects a deeper problem. Prices are low because decades of population loss and economic decline have gutted property values. Rockford was once a serious manufacturing hub: furniture, fasteners, machine tools. At its peak in the mid-20th century, the city was known as the screw capital of the world for its fastener manufacturing industry. It had a thriving, stable working-class community. Manufacturing's collapse hit Rockford hard. The city has been consistently ranked among the most economically distressed mid-sized cities in America. Violent crime rates have historically been among the highest in Illinois. Unemployment has persistently outpaced the national average. Census data shows that while Rockford proper has around 148,000 residents, the city has been losing population for decades. The young and educated leave for Chicago or other metros. What remains is an older population with fewer resources, struggling to maintain the infrastructure of a city built for far more people. The housing affordability that makes Rockford attractive to some buyers is also a symbol of the city's struggle. You can buy a house here for $60,000. That sounds like a deal, but ask yourself, why is it only $60,000? Number 7. Shreveport, Louisiana. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from watching a city built on natural resources slowly run out of them. Shreveport, Louisiana knows that pain well. For generations, Shreveport rode the wave of oil and gas prosperity. The region's economy was built on extraction, pulling wealth from the ground and distributing it across the community in the form of jobs, tax revenue, and business activity. But that era is fading. The oil and gas sector in northwest Louisiana has contracted significantly. The jobs that once paid middle-class wages to working families have disappeared or been automated. Young professionals have been leaving at an accelerating pace, looking for cities with more economic opportunity and a brighter future. According to early 2025 data, Shreveport's unemployment rate sat at 4.4%. Slightly above the national average. But that number understates the structural economic challenges. Large numbers of residents have simply left the workforce entirely. Median household income lags behind national averages. Poverty rates remain stubbornly high. The city has attempted to diversify through casinos and entertainment, a strategy that brought short-term revenue but hasn't generated the broad-based economic growth that working families need. Shreveport's population has declined from a peak of nearly 220,000 to well under 180,000 by recent estimates, a drop that has left behind vacant commercial properties, underfunded schools, and a sense of civic uncertainty. The question for Shreveport, and for dozens of resource-dependent towns like it, is whether there is a future beyond the industry that built them. Number 8. Detroit, Michigan. You've heard the Detroit comeback story, the Quicken Loans Arena, the revitalized Midtown, the tech startups, the coffee shops. Zillow says Detroit is an affordable housing market. The narrative says Detroit is rising, but the 2026 census data tells a more complicated story. Detroit peaked at 1.85 million people in 1950. It is now under 620,000. That's a loss of more than 1.2 million people. While its downtown core has seen real investment and genuine revitalization, many of Detroit's neighborhoods remain in severe distress. The comeback is real for some Detroiters, but for large portions of the city, particularly the majority Black communities on the east and west sides, the revival hasn't arrived. Poverty rates citywide remain above 30%. Tens of thousands of properties sit abandoned. School quality in many neighborhoods remains chronically underfunded. The problem with Detroit's narrative is that it conflates the city center with the city as a whole. Yes, there are cranes in downtown. Yes, there are new restaurants and boutique hotels. But 2 miles away, you can find entire blocks where every house is abandoned or demolished. Detroit is a study in what happens when economic revival is geographically concentrated. The money is coming back, but it's not going everywhere. And for the residents in the forgotten neighborhoods, the census numbers confirm what they already knew. The comeback isn't for them. Number 9. Jackson, Mississippi. If Flint's water crisis was a national scandal, Jackson, Mississippi's ongoing infrastructure collapse should be generating the same level of outrage. But it hasn't. Jackson, the state capital of Mississippi, has been dealing with a water system in catastrophic failure for years. In 2022, the city's entire water supply failed following flooding, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without safe running water. The crisis exposed what census data and economic reports had been showing for years. Jackson was a city under severe structural stress. Population decline has been relentless. Jackson peaked at over 200,000 residents. Today, estimates put the city closer to 150,000, and the decline is ongoing. As the Newsweek analysis notes, the counties around Jackson are among those with the steepest population losses in the entire country as residents search for cities with better infrastructure, more jobs, and higher wages. Mississippi as a whole has some of the highest rates of financial distress in the nation. Census Bureau data shows nearly 50% of Mississippi adults report difficulty covering basic expenses, the highest of any state. The loss of a stable tax base makes it harder to fund infrastructure repairs. Failing infrastructure drives more people away. Fewer people means less tax revenue. It's a doom loop that Jackson has been caught in for decades. A city should not be fighting for the right to have clean running water in 2026, but that is Jackson's reality, and the census numbers confirm it's getting worse, not better. Number 10. Cairo, Illinois. We end this list with a town that, in many ways, has already crossed the point of no return. Cairo, Illinois, pronounced Cairo by locals, sits at the very southern tip of Illinois, where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi. It was once a thriving river town. In the 1920s, Cairo had a population of over 14,000 people. It had hotels, department stores, a vibrant commercial district. Today, Cairo has fewer than 2,000 residents, possibly far fewer. The exact count is difficult because so many properties are abandoned that even census workers struggle to determine who is still there. This is what the end stage of population decline looks like. The town has no functioning grocery store. The hospital closed years ago. Most of the downtown buildings are either abandoned, collapsed, or have been demolished. Entire neighborhoods are nothing but empty lots and crumbling foundations. Cairo's decline was driven by a combination of factors: the decline of river commerce, racial tensions that caused white flight in the 1960s and 70s, deindustrialization, and geographic isolation. The town is surrounded on three sides by water, making economic diversification especially difficult. Various organizations have tried to revitalize Cairo over the decades. None have succeeded. At this point, many urban planners and demographers use Cairo as a case study in what happens when a community loses its economic purpose and has no geographic or demographic advantages to fall back on. Cairo is not a warning. Cairo is what happens when the warning goes unheeded for 60 years. So there you have it. 10 American towns that the 2026 census data is putting a spotlight on. Communities that are losing people, losing hope, and in some cases, losing their very existence. Now here's what I want you to think about before you close this video. Every single one of these places had a golden age. Every one of them had generations of families who worked hard, built communities, raised kids, and believed in the American promise. The decline of these towns isn't a story about lazy people or bad choices. It's a story about policy failures, industrial abandonment, and a country that sometimes forgets its own people. The question isn't whether these towns were great. They were. The question is, what are we going to do about what they've become? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have a connection to any of these places? Do you think America is doing enough for struggling communities? Drop it in the comments below. Seriously, I read every single one, and the conversations in this community are always worth having. If this video gave you something to think about, do me a favor and share it with someone who might not have heard these stories. A lot of people only know Detroit or Flint from headlines. The reality on the ground is so much deeper. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join a community that cares about the real stories of real America. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.